cool. So today, first of all, we're celebrating the 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is a lot of fun. And it's just, I love making content, if that was not obvious to all of you. But one of the things I always love doing is making the questions more related to my audience as opposed to just general stuff and be like, hopefully somebody benefits from this. Today I can guarantee that you will benefit at least from the question you asked if you submitted one. So let's do this. I've got to pull them all up. The biggest problem with this is some questions were absurdly complicated. And I will give my best to like give a few pieces of advice, but there's literally some that could take over an hour to dive into. They're like, can you give me an entire plan on how to learn the Tchaikovsky concerto? I was like, okay. I'll give you like 3 tips that helped me when I learned it. But there's some questions like that. And then there's others that are really specific and narrowed. So I'm just going to go in the order that I received them in. And fingers crossed we'll get through them all. If any of you have actually like ever seen me on a live call before, I go on tangents. So we'll do the best. But there's 3 that I can combine together. Raquel, you asked about the 9 steps of learning a new piece. And then 2 others asked about how would I learn the Tchaikovsky concerto, and then another one said, how would I learn the Chopin 4th scherzo in 3 weeks? And I was like, it's like one of the hardest Chopin pieces there is. I could learn it in 3 weeks, but that would be a push. And that's like when I'm seriously practicing. So I'll try to sort of answer all 3 of those in one package because they're related. The way you learn one thing is the way you learn anything. There's not really a clear separation. You branch off when it comes to the specifics, but the framework is the same. And as I told you, Raquel, on email, the 9-step process to learning a new piece could literally take me several hours to really dive into. If I were to write it in book form, it would be multiple chapters. There's just a lot to consider. But I will give you at least the main ideas, and then we're going to really quickly show some specifics on the Chopin and the Tchaikovsky, and then get to the other questions, which are a little bit more specific than these big general ones. So the more general the question, the more general the answer, is basically what I'm saying. That's going to be the theme of today. So here we go. And let's see. We'll basically do this. Rosie, were you, because you didn't have video on last time, was it you that was on the last Q&A like 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was my very first time. I had signed up.
Okay, because I was like, I didn't know you at that point, so you already saw a little bit of this. Because,
yeah, sounds familiar.
Because I was like, okay, we'll just go for it. And I didn't know you. So anyway, a little review for you. But for everyone else, I actually have yet to make a video on this online because it's just, it would be an insult to make a 1-minute video out of this. So unless I do long form YouTube, this one's off the charts. There's 3 phases, and we're going to focus on the general feeling that each one needs to bring and what you need to accomplish in each phase, as opposed to what the specifics are, because that's what takes all the time. But phase 1 is the prep work. You can think of it like building a house. You need the foundation, right? Phase 2 is the conditioning. Think of it like building the walls, putting in texturing, stuff like that. That's where most of your work goes. So, not conditioning, I guess. Details, probably a better word for it. And then phase 3 is the conditioning. Conditioning would be like finishing touches, like of roofing and painting the outside and that sort of stuff, if we're using this house analogy. Oh, it cropped. Let's try, no. Let's try that, there we go. So basically what you're trying to achieve in the foundation is notes, fingering, and rhythm. That's it. It's the easiest step, actually, unless you have a lot of rhythm problems. But it's those three things. The notes are the actual notes you're playing on the piano, of course. The fingering, it can be a process because you often have to try multiple options before you commit to anything. The rhythm, it's either right or wrong. So you just basically, the thing I look for right away in rhythm is, are there any visual patterns throughout the whole piece that I feel like don't make sense to me right up front? So, let's see, I don't really have any scores on hand right now. Hard to think of an example, but at this point, I've played so much repertoire, it's genuinely difficult to find a rhythm that I haven't already gotten fluency in. But pretty much it would be in the 20th century if there was some like 5 on 7 and 3 at the same time. Then it'd be like, all right, I'm solving that before I solve anything else in the piece. Because rhythm is the backbone of music. And this example tends to go over well. I'm going to clap a rhythm and I'm going to see if anyone can recognize it. So you won't hear the pitches, you're only going to hear the claps. I want you to put in the chat what this theme is. If anyone, yeah, there we go. Star Wars Imperial March. Nice, you're on it, Raquel. So, and everyone else, if you got that, since she beat you to it, just put a 1 in the chat if you recognized it. And if you didn't, that's fine. There's 100 other things. I mean, most of us are probably classical, so I should be using like Mozart. Here's a good example. Does anyone recognize that? You might not know the name of it. Mozart. But you can't give away all the answers. Right? So the reason rhythm is the backbone is you can often recognize something just through the rhythm, if you have nothing else. At least Raquel proved this to us. And if not only through the rhythm, it's at least enough of a staple that without it, it would be weird. Nice, Dante. Also, that's like the most amazing name. Like, you've got the Liszt Dante Sonata, so which was a reference to something else, but that's still pretty epic. So, yeah, exactly. That's the point. It's like we can recognize rhythm. So that's the backbone, and that's why I consider it a foundational thing. If you have not internalized the rhythm, you are definitely not ready to think about line, dynamics, pedaling, and all these other nuances of touch. Those are all important, but that would be like trying to paint a wall that's not even built yet, or trying to put a wall where you don't even have posts in your foundation. Nothing's going to hold that up. So rhythm has to be first. And you can't have rhythm if you don't have notes and fingering, because the first two go together. You might have all the right notes, but if you're playing Rondo alla Turca with nothing but thumbs, that's not going to happen, right? You have to have a flow within the fingers to be able to recreate it. And you have to have that based on the notes that are actually happening. So those three are inseparable. And then when it comes to the details, it's everything else that you would consider part of learning and interpretation. Because conditioning is, the learning is already over. Conditioning is like what you do in your mind, your mindset, to actually help you feel more confident when you perform the piece. It has nothing to do with learning the piece. It's securing the piece. So, I'm sure at least a few of you are not familiar with my 12 fundamentals. And well, actually no, because you're on my email list, so you all have read my guide, hopefully. I still come across people that like have followed me for like 6 months and like, yeah, I haven't read your guide. I'm like, it's free. That's the first thing you should have gotten. But for those of you that haven't, this is what I'm referring to. The 12 fundamental categories of skill that all pianists have, whether they like it or not. You may not be fluent in them, but you do use these things. If you've played even one piano piece, you have, on purpose or on accident, been part of all of these 12 without knowing. And the more you're conscious of each one individually, the faster you improve. So, you know, pitch, fingering, rhythm, pitches, notes. So it's on purpose put in this order. The first 3 are the foundation, and then the other 9 is what I mean in phase 2. That's when you think, oh, my right hand needs to be louder than my left hand. My articulation, it needs to be legato here. Or like in certain moments of Chopin, it's this sort of half legato, half staccato called leggero, and you get it's kind of like, it's clean and dry and dribbly, but also kind of smooth in a weird way, right? So there's all sorts of shades to articulation, just like a painter has 15 different colors of green, shades of it, you know, based on the mood they may want to create. And then, so all of these, the considerations you need to have are enormous for each category. I've said this 100 times. I could write an entire book on each one of these 12 fundamental categories. So by no means are we going to get into them all today. In fact, I have a 3-month intensive coaching program, one-on-one, that we go through all of these. And even after that, 90 minutes a week of lessons and tons of other stuff. Like, people still haven't learned everything. 'Cause it took me like 7 years to feel confident about everything I know in every category. But that said, we're going back to the whiteboard and phase 2, and that's going to be the other 9. So once you've done all 12 fundamentals and individually studied them, that's your first 2 phases. And the only reason I separate phase 1 and 2 is because you absolutely cannot have phase 2 without phase 1. So technically you could say it's just 2 phases, the 12 fundamentals and then the conditioning. But it's very logical and reasonable to split the first and the second phase into 2 steps. So, foundational skills. Oh, I meant to put 9, not parentheses. So, 9 other foundational skills. Conditioning is all the things that we would do in the mind to feel more at ease on stage. And this is what I call overtraining. I've talked about it before, and this I actually do have a few videos on, so I'm not going to get too far into it today. But basically, you practice in ways that are far beyond the skill level you actually want to have. And I just wrapped up a call from my Key Learners Club an hour ago, where we were talking about practice habits and literally having 2 metronomes on at the same time while only matching one. So like 126 on this one and 120 on that one. And playing only at the 120, trying to tune out the 126. That's what I mean by things for the mind. This is not about learning the piece. It's about teaching yourself to focus in an intense way past what you actually will be required to do on stage. Because obviously nobody has 2 metronomes going on while they're performing. So if you can handle that at home, then under pressure, your skill is always going to drop. But if your skill is above your average, then when you have pressure and it drops, now you're still at the high level you want to be at on stage. And I could, on a different call someday, I could literally share hundreds of strategies over the last 12 years that I've done in order to feel more confident on stage, all related to this one topic. I mean, endless things like intentionally making it harder, intentionally making it more distracting, setting alarms while I do run-throughs, you know, so just like when it goes off, I'll be in the zone and like I'll try to not be thrown by it. Having people knock, with my students, I'll take my broom and like brush right up to their feet while they're trying to pedal, you know, and like all sorts of crazy stuff, right? Because if you can learn to overcome that, you've basically set yourself up for a perfect performance. And that doesn't mean you'll play perfectly. It means when something goes wrong, you're not shook by it, and you can keep going and not have to like stutter and stop and go back and stuff like that. So, yeah, so I would love to talk about this for 3 hours, but I can't go any more into that without like not answering anyone out there's questions. So how this applies to the Chopin Scherzo 4 and the Tchaikovsky Concerto. We're talking about some of the hardest repertoire in the entire piano realm. The Tchaikovsky alone, I've played 9.5 piano concertos, 9 complete and half of the Beethoven Third. And I've played Rock 3 and Brahms 2, which are considered to be some of the hardest ones in the repertoire. I'm no joking you here. I think the Tchaikovsky concerto is harder than both of those, from personal experience. I had so much trouble playing it. And I was coached by Santiago Rodriguez, who literally has like gold star reviews for his recording of it. I mean, he knows that. He was in the Tchaikovsky competition in the 70s, and he knows that concerto as well as anyone on the planet. And even he was like, oh, it's terrible. Nobody likes playing this piece. So, personally, Rock 3 gets all the attention. I think Tchaikovsky is so much more uncomfortable for the hand. And I'm not here to just nerd out about it. I'm here because somebody mentioned, I don't know, I think this was Vivian. Let's see. Yeah, is Vivian here? I'm not sure. I don't know who the mysterious iPhone is. So Vivian, if you're here and you want to comment in the chat, you can. But it's just, honestly, it's brutal. So we would honestly need 4 or 5, even 6 private lessons to like craft out the perfect plan for you to learn it, as well as like it would have to be tailored to your personal skills. And this goes for anyone at any stage with any piece. There is not one perfect way to learn a piece, because if I go to learn Chopin Scherzo 4, it's going to go a lot faster for me, who's played like 2 hours of Chopin, than it will if that's your first Chopin piece. Because there's going to be things in there that you're not prepared for. Doesn't mean you can't play it. It just means you have a lot more ground to cover throughout the process that some people wouldn't have to practice at all because they're used to that already. And the same goes for the Tchaikovsky concerto. Like, if you haven't already nearly mastered diminished seventh arpeggios and octaves and chords and really crowded hand positions, then playing any of that concerto is going to be just awful. But if you have some fluency in all those skills, then it's like, okay, I still have to put in a lot of time, but at least I know what I'm doing at every stage. So I've never met Vivian, so I have no idea where her level is. So it's just really genuinely impossible to say, oh, here's exactly what you should do. It's a long piece. In general, the longer the piece, the longer it's going to take. Kind of goes without saying. You want to try to divide digestible sections. So if you, for example, if you want to learn it in 3 months, you have 12 weeks, then I would cut some of each movement into 12 parts. So like the third movement, you have 12 sections. The second movement, you have 12 sections. And the first movement, you have 12 sections. So that you're chipping away at all 3 at the same time, but you're not just crawling from beginning to end. That'll take you forever. Start with the very hardest stuff. The stuff that you just read through and you go, oh my gosh, I'll never learn this. That's impossible. Conquer those battles first for 2 reasons. It's like eating your vegetables before dessert. If you don't start with the hard stuff, then you're going to get really slowed down in your process when you get there. But also, wouldn't it be horrible if you learn half the piece and then you get to a couple sections that you truly just can't play and you're not ready for? And then you're like, oh wow, now I'm stuck with this and I just wasted 2 months on the rest of it. So you kind of want to determine right away, like, can I handle this or can I not? And I gave the exact same advice to somebody learning the Chopin First Ballade. I say learning in air quotes. Because he's like, I'm going to play this. And he's like, I'm 4 pages in. I'm like, oh, okay, so you're still in the honeymoon. Because a lot of people can learn the first 4 pages of the First Ballade. And then they get here. without saying why it falls apart. The problem with this is you've put months in and then you go, I guess I can't finish this piece now. So my heart rate is up just from playing that. It's a workout. Don't do that, is what I'm saying. Determine right away whether or not you can do the hardest thing, and then go back and say, okay, now that's out of the way. Not only do you know for sure, you're more confident, the rest of the piece you're going to learn faster. Because if it takes you a month to learn like the coda of Ballade 1, then you're like, oh, I could probably learn the rest in a month. It's way easier. So this applies to both the Chopin Scherzo and the Tchaikovsky one. That without going in crazy detail, that's really the best I can do, because we have like 100 other questions to address. So there we go. I like to take little power pauses. I need to breathe. But does anyone have questions before I move on? You can either unmute or put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just observing that seems to be the opposite, to take the hard part first. I mean, it makes sense in piano, but in other things like cleaning house, organizing, you go for the wins first, the small wins, the easy things first.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of perspective. Like, people do it both ways, right? I've definitely done that. Or like, if anyone has heard Dave Ramsey with all the money advice, he's always like, try to pay off your small debts first. And there's two schools of thought here. That is great to have a quick win. If you have like a $10,000 debt and then like a $500 debt, it'd be great if you could pay off the 5. But there's also like more motivation in attacking the big one. It'll take longer, but if you can get the 10 out of the way, it's going to make a lot more difference than the 5. So I think it comes down to some degree personal preference. I'm the kind of person that in everything in life, I get the hard stuff out of the way. So, I mean, and they tell you this in the entrepreneur world all the time, which like these days, 80% of my life is business, entrepreneur stuff. It's not even playing piano anymore. But they're like, get up early, and the very first thing you should be doing is the thing that's going to make the biggest difference, the biggest impact, or generate the most money. So if, for in my case, it's, I should do this more, but it's like Instagram DMs. I'm like so bad at that. I've DM'd over 2,500 people in the last 7 months, but it's so hard to stay on top of. And so if I procrastinate that, it's not hard to write a message. But when you have a wall of 87 messages in one day, it's just like, I look at that and I'm like, oh, I don't even want to start today. And sometimes I just don't. The problem with that is that if I always let that be the end of the day, my energy's drained and I'm even less likely to do it. So if I get up at 4 in the morning and I'm like, I'm just going to hit DMs for half an hour, then it's like, that's my mental block. So if I get that done, I'm set. Like, it's not a quick win because I'm not ever going to catch up on everything in one day, but it's at least knowing that I'm working toward the thing that will make the biggest impact. I mean, some of you found me through YouTube, but most of you found me because I DM'd you on Instagram. It was like, here's my guide, sign up for my list, and you did it. You know, and which came after I made content. So content creation is like also a really big priority for me, right? Like I post 2 videos a day. If I didn't do that, half of you wouldn't be here. And, you know, all the advice I have would be going to waste. So I think of impact first. Like, how can I reach the most people? How can I transform the most amount of lives? And what do I need to do? What are my top priorities? Or even just one top priority that I need to absolutely get done first so that that can happen. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, it's preference to some degree. But I do think generally on almost anything, if you get the hard thing out first, then everything else is better. So, my opinion. So, all right, let's see. Divide a piece into different sections, learning it with difficulty in mix. Yeah, I think I know what you mean. So, yeah, I guess to nuance it, I don't learn only the hardest thing. I just make sure that that's taken care of as the priority. So imagine you have an hour to practice, then at least the first 20 minutes should go to in the Chopin case, it should go to the Pollack coda, right? That doesn't mean you're only doing that. You could then start touching on other things, and you've got 10 sections in the piece, and you do another 20 minutes on 2 other sections to fill your hour. That's fine, but it's a matter of what do you go to first and what do you go to most consistently. So yeah, you're not going to solve a big hard thing in one day, or 1 hour, or 10 hours even. It's in the continual chipping away. I'm just basically saying don't save that for late in the process. So like you mentioned, Dante, the Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody 2, which, oh man, that's a tough piece. I played it 2 years ago, I think. I don't know, something like that. In fact, I had a friend of mine write me an original cadenza for it, and I said, take the Marc-Andre Hamelin cadenza, which is 6 minutes, and write me one like 2% more accessible. Like, I want it to be ridiculously difficult and over the top, not quite as hard as Hamelin's. And he's like, oh yeah, challenge accepted. And so he gave me everything in it. But in any case, that is a perfect example of a piece that pretty much every page is harder than the last. It's just ridiculous by the end, especially if you have a really tough cadenza, which is near the end of the whole piece. So that's a perfect example. I would just literally learn it backwards. Like, within reason, you could just take the last page, learn that, and the page before that, and learn that, and the page before that. It might make sense to cut it a few measures, give or take, based on like where a section starts. But that's definitely what I would do in that case. And in fact, that's pretty much how I approached it, with the exception of the opening introduction, whatever it's called, 3 minutes. I was kind of chipping away at that the whole time. Not that it's that hard, but there's just a lot of musical things to do in it. So I wanted to kind of get familiar and comfortable with that as I was grinding all the crazy technical stuff at the end. Okay, so I've got to speed through the rest. We've got time, but not a lot. Some people sent me between 3 and 7 questions each, so I do apologize. I can only answer 1 per person, because otherwise we'd literally be here all day. So let's just do this. I'll just take the first question here from Lowell. How to pedal beautifully to give a musically astounding result. I love that word. How to determine pedaling gauge, when and where to use the soft pedal and sustain pedal. Okay, so big topic once again. But there is not one rule to how to pedal beautifully, but I'll show you what I do that allows me to have control over any pedaling I end up with. This will probably surprise many of you. If I can find, actually I think it's under my computer here. The Rite of Spring, Stravinsky. I haven't played it in a long time, but I'm sure I can show you this passage. I literally pedal every single note when I learn a piece. Move this a little closer. And what that looks like is slowing down at a tempo where I can do that. I mean, if you're playing the first Chopin Etude, for example, you obviously can't change your foot on every note. That would be absurd. But you practice it at a tempo where you could. So the famous Crocs, you get to see them live and personal, up close and personal. I get so many comments on Instagram and YouTube over my Crocs. It's hilarious. Most of them in favor, but there's a few people that like, you're a hack. You clearly don't have your life together because you wear Crocs. Hilarious. Anyway, so I often will play even 32nd or 64th notes where I can literally change on every single note. So the rule is keep the pedal down the whole time, but every time you have a new note, you change it. So it's never just like floating in the air. Your resting place is at the bottom of the pedal. And you do this, I'll explain why after, but let me just show you how it works first. So here's a passage of the Rite of Spring with a bunch of crazy flute stuff. So And then within that, kind of like this sticky oboe line in the middle. So I'm going to play at about half that tempo, and you're going to see my foot. I'll do socks so you can really see it. Very active here. Literally thudding every single note. And if I wanted to go farther, higher in range and lower in range, then I would just have to go slower. Obviously, no one's going to pedal like that in performance, and neither do I. But I still practice that on every single piece that I've ever learned. To do that. Because here's the rule, if you're changing on every note, you never have blur, right? So it's avoiding the possibility that you pedal too long. That's one of the things you're accomplishing. It's also making every moment that much harder that then feels like a relief in comparison. Because your foot is a much bigger muscle than your fingers or your wrist. Like if you move your foot versus just wiggle your fingers, it's so much more physical effort. And it actually takes up more brain activity to be able to do that. So if you associate an entire foot motion with every finger motion, your brain literally tricks itself into thinking I'm working 3 times as hard. Now imagine what happens when you take the foot away. It's like, oh, that was easy. Because there's way less effort involved now. So it'd be like if you were lifting pull-ups and you put on like a backpack with 50 pounds, and then you do pull-ups without the backpack on. That's the reason that I pedal on every note. So it has nothing to do actually with getting better pedaling, and yet it has everything to do with getting better pedaling. Because when you do that, all the difference is now you're just going to be holding it for longer amounts of time before you change it. So in that exact example, I might actually hold it down for 6 notes. Or let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, it's groups of 12, so. Yeah, I actually held for groups of 12 in that case. So, put it down, change, change. So, there we go, 12 less changes than I've already prepared for. It's definitely not a problem now to change it 1 time instead of 24 times, right? And look at that, it's already coming back. That's the other thing, is because the fingers are working so much less, they feel lighter. And it's totally mental. It's not a physical reality. They're not actually lighter. But when you're not moving the foot so much, it feels lighter. So much of mastery comes down to what your brain is perceiving. And most of the time, it's not reality. It's all in the head. That's why like nerves can mess up your performance, because it's not that your performance is actually worse. It's just that you get in your head and it starts thinking these things that get in the way, right? So, all right. Oh, good. I'm glad that that's good advice. It's worked for me. And then, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Jonah? Or John? Yeah, I'm used to Joanna. I've never seen that spelling before. But, I see that you've never thought about this trick. Most people haven't. Definitely. In fact, I had 8 teachers throughout all of my study, and only one of them ever suggested this. And he played for Leon Fleischer in a master class. And actually, he had played for him before unintentionally because he won the third prize in the 1969 Van Cliburn. And Leon Fleischer was on the jury. So then a couple of years later, he played for him again in a master class, and Leon's like, wow, you were already amazing in the Cliburn. You're even better now. Like, I'll take you on as an undergrad or as a master's student. And he almost did, but then he studied with someone else. But Leon said, the pedaling that you just did in your recital was really good, Mark. He's like, it's actually a little too good. And like, it's as if he was like jealous. And we're talking about one of the best pianists of all time. So, it was Mark that taught me to do this, and there was nothing he couldn't play. And no color he couldn't produce. He would play like the Chopin Third Sonata or tons of Debussy, and you would literally watch him. You're like, how has he mastered pedaling at that level? Like every nuance of sound, and it's because he practiced like this all the time. And the more I did it, the proof is in the pudding. I'm not going to comment on my own playing, but listen to the Rite of Spring if you haven't. It's there. The proof is there that this works. So there you go. That's how at least I would practice pedaling. It's an entire different discussion: where to pedal, how long to pedal, how to use the soft pedal. These are 30-minute responses each, which I just can't get into today. Okay, I want to make sure I don't miss anyone. Okay. Jonah's question. Jonah, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say it. Forgive me. So you were looking at the Opus 25 number 1, Chopin Etude. I've really been looking forward to this one because I've got a lot of thoughts on this. First of all, everyone should read, I don't know if I have it here, it's somewhere on my shelf. Chopin, Pianist and Teacher, as seen by his pupils. If you want any advice on playing Chopin, that's like not the only resource, but it's the go-to resource. It's like handling the Ballade number 1 coda first. You read that book first, and then you go to other things about Chopin. But there's a lot of advice in there, like Chopin's letters to his students and all sorts of things, or their writing describing his teaching. And a couple things we know about his teaching was that he would have students try things in as many different ways as possible before they would achieve fluency. And actually, this exact etude is referenced in how he would teach this method. So it's a perfect fit. He would have every fundamental category, you would try it reverse, and then do branches of it. So like in articulation, you would play legato and staccato. You know, like if you haven't heard it, I'll just play a quick sample so that you all can be familiar with it first. This one, it's beautiful. It's called the Aeolian Harp. And it's just fluttery and gorgeous and all the stuff we love about piano playing. So he would teach this by having, you would try it all staccato and no pedal, of course. And so on. Both in the fingers, so that was only from my knuckle. And then wrist staccato, which will have to be a little slower, but it's, imagine like you take a pen and you use just enough momentum to throw it, so it doesn't like drop. You'd go like off screen here, but like that, just enough. So you're not like, it's not jerky. It's just a little bit of like throwing a dart, right? And you do little bouncy, right? Still very loose. And then you do from the elbow staccato. This is what Mark Westcott taught a lot. This is the slowest staccato, but the most powerful. So it's like a free drop, like gravity just throws you down. And I would definitely stick with the other two mostly, but this one has a little value. It's the least accurate, I should also say, because you're going from higher above, right? But the way Mark taught it is put a pencil right here and squeeze the pencil. Not literally like squeeze it with tension, but just so that it doesn't fall off of your arm. Like if you're like this, it can roll off. Versus if you put it right here and hold it still. He's like, do that, and then drop from there like free fall with gravity. And then you have to, of course, catch the note too, which is with the fingertip. So, a lot of flexibility right here. Those three kinds of staccato, and then everything. You mix up the rhythms. You'd mix up pedaling. We just talked about pedaling every note, but in this piece I would also do things like pedal every 2 notes, every 3, and every 4, and then every 6. They all have different value. Doing it in 2s gets you these little micro groups. Change, 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 change. Then 3s, change, 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 change. 4s would be double of 2, and then 6 is going to be the whole gesture. 1. So change, 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 change. And again, you may not do any of these when you actually perform it, but in doing this, you're just getting your foot really activated. Another fun thing to do is to hold the melody and practice the rest staccato. And so on and so forth. And I could list things all day, but I have a rule, and actually in about 3 weeks I'm doing a long form YouTube video on this. It's called the 20x5 strategy. You take 20 ways of practicing a piece, and you do 5 reps each. So it's 100 repetitions total. And that will almost always solve any technical problem you have, as long as you can just think of 20 ways to practice it. You have to get outside the box. I have about 85 ways I've changed things or manipulated how they're written in order to increase the variety of how I practice. I don't do all 85 with everything in every piece. Some variations make more sense for certain pieces than others. But if you can just pick about 20, then automatically you've solved the problem. Because basically the way you're doing it is you're teaching your brain to understand it from all sides of the diamond. You know, if you look at a diamond, you only see one facet, but as you turn it, you actually see different contours and even like colors and amounts of shine and shimmer and all that. So this is what you're doing, is you're teaching your brain to understand it from a panoramic perspective. Or I think in the guide I share the Harvard study, I'm not sure, but of cornhole, where the people that shoot around all sides of the hole and overshoot and undershoot and go left and to the right, they actually got better at the game than people who were just told to aim directly into the hole every time. So in other words, don't just try the end result 100 times and expect it to be better. You try basically everything but the end result, and you're gathering information of what is not the right answer. And then your brain knows how to center that in and calibrate it to more of a middle ground. It's this total fluency of not just the way it's played, but the way the instrument is capable of working. And this is the way Chopin taught. I've taught this way for years, even before I realized that Chopin taught this way. And then when I heard that he taught this way, I was like, yes, I have more credibility. Not that I didn't, I had results of my own, but it's a whole nother thing when like one of the best pianists of all time has the same philosophy. So that's how I would recommend. Pretty much just do a little bit of everything. And I know specifically you said you can't voice the melody properly. I don't know that I would like do anything specifically for voicing, but in getting total fluency of everything else, you will most likely automatically be able to do it better. One way though, not necessarily voicing, but just in melodies in general, is sing them and don't play them. Right? So like, if you took that pattern, you would sing the E flat. Forgive my vocal training, I haven't had any. Oh, oh. There we go, I have to hit falsetto. So I sing the E flat and then I play everything but that. So, oh, 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 oh. This kind of thing. And you'd probably want to continually sing it, I just don't have the voice for it. But, so you could develop a sense of separation. Because the piano, it's too easy to just pluck through notes. You get the key down and it's the right pitch. But we don't, I mean, unless you're consciously thinking of your sound, you're probably not going to actually improve it that much. A violinist makes a bad sound by default and has to get that right from the beginning, so they're automatically more musical. All they do is how good can I make the sound? And a woodwind player or a brass player is the same because they're using their breath. But pianists are like, no, I can just noodle through something, you know. And it's just dead as a doornail. So it's actually, in some ways, it's too easy to get it right, so to speak. And the more life we breathe into it, the harder it becomes, but the more valuable it becomes as well. So sing the melody while playing the rest of the fingers, you're gonna now hear it and express it in a different way, and for sure the voicing will be easier. Because you have a different connection to it. So, all right, we're coming in close. 10 minutes left. Definitely will not answer all of these, but that's okay. Maybe I'll do a part 2. All right, so Vasilis. I'm not sure if Vasilis is here. I'm gonna try and answer first the ones of the people that are actually here. So, let's see, Dante, you had a question, I think. Oh yes, and by the way, I saw you also emailed me separate from this. I promise I'll get back to you. My inbox is flooded right now. So, it might be a couple days. I hear you. I will definitely respond to outside of what today was. But I also see you responded to today. So let's see. What is the best practice session and exercise when you're limited on time, 2 to 3 hours a day, and you want to master difficult pieces? Okay. So, and by the way, yeah, you also asked if I do online lessons. I do, and we can absolutely talk about that outside of this. So, in terms of limited on time, it's funny, I laughed for me because I'm so busy these days. If I get an hour of practice, that's a good day. Like, that's amazing. And that's not always the case. I had 7 years where I practiced 6 hours a day or more. So I know what you mean by limited. When we're talking big pieces and hard repertoire, you do need the time. But more than that, you need the smarts. And so you're asking the right question. Like, how do I actually make it count as opposed to how do I put in more time? Because if you don't have more time, you're shot, right? So there's got to be a better way. And actually, big surprise, I know gobs of concert pianists. Like, full-time, their only job is to go perform. Probably if you can think of anyone on the concert stage today, I've either met them personally, talked to them, or I have a friend who is close with them. I mean, competition winners, industry people, CDs, anyone you would hear. Like, I've connected with it some way in the last several years. And many of them, I hear the same thing over and over. Most professionals practice 3 hours a day or less. Which, if I would have heard that as a teen, I would have been like, no way. Like, there's always exceptions to this. There's, Valentina Lisitsa, who I've met. She has sometimes logged 12 or 13 hours a day. That is absurd. I don't think I've done that once in my whole life. There's days where Argerich has done 20 minutes, and there's days where she's done half the day, right? So I think to some degree, every professional it's not like for 10 years they have the same schedule. But I have heard over and over that actually most of them do not practice very often. And Jeffrey Kahane is a great example. He's a full-time conductor, full-time pianist, full-time teacher. He teaches at USC here in the States. And like, obviously, if you do all three of those things, you don't have 6 hours a day for each. There's no way you do. And he's got a family, he's got kids, he travels all the time, he's on airplanes every other weekend. So like, obviously the practice time is very limited. Garrick Olson, who I also have connected with. One of my students studies with Garrick right now. Garrick sometimes only practices an hour a day, or less, because he's traveling. So we're talking about some of the best pianists on the planet alive today. Don't practice more than an hour or two, sometimes 3. And I'm just saying that because I want to put it in perspective. That there has to be something they're doing that everyone else is not doing, if they're playing at that level, that consistently. And that's a good question, Raquel. That is indeed some of what they do. Yes, away from the piano practice. So much of practice is in the mind. If that hasn't been clear from most of today's call, like the conditioning, what kind of gets you thinking about what I started with, right? The 9 steps of learning a piece. That last phase of conditioning, it's all mental. And absolutely can be done away from the piano. It's the most disciplined type of practice, the hardest, because if you've ever done any sort of meditation or whatever, your mind will drift and like 45 seconds after you're trying to stay calm, right? You like close your eyes and then you're like, oh, what's for lunch? And did I leave the oven on? And like, it's just really hard to stay centered. But if you can do it, mental practice is absolutely outstanding. And Walter Gieseking was a big proponent of mental practice, who, it's hard to prove, but it's very possible he had the largest repertoire of any pianist in history. At least in the top 10. Maybe Franz Liszt had more repertoire, I don't know. But Walter Gieseking, long dead, like 100 years ago, kind of a pianist. He had at any given time like 150 programs or something that he had played throughout his career, and he could often do like 20, 30 hours of repertoire just at the drop of a hat without warm up. Like, I mean, he was just an entire, not just a league above everyone else, like 10 leagues above everyone else. But he primarily was taught from a young child to practice mentally, not touching the piano, and he was said to be able to learn an entire piano concerto on an airplane flight. It's like absolutely unfathomable. I mean, I've not gotten to that level. I can definitely learn a small piece. Like, I could, for example, something like Schumann, Strange Lands and People, which I'm messing up because I haven't actually played it. Something like that. Like something like that, I could definitely learn without ever touching the piano. I could study it, visualize it, imagine it, and then go play it. When it gets a little harder than that, I can do it with a little bit of assistance. And then if we're talking difficulty of like a Chopin ballade, then I like having the finger confirmation over the keys. But yes, mental practice is a big part of it, for sure. So that said, let's see. In terms of other things to make the best practice sessions count, I mean, this is like what I talk about all the time. I teach everything and anything and everything when it comes to music and piano and on practice and all the things. But I will have to say that if I were to be credited for one thing when I die, whenever that is, I would hope that it's the practice coach kind of a thing. Like that's my bread and butter. It's what I feel like I separate from the pack on, is like how I can help people to 4x or 6x or sometimes even 8x their time, where you can get the same in 1 hour as you can in 8. Because I've been able to do that for myself, and time after time I've been able to do it for other people. So that said, it's like a whole career of information. Like there's not one thing that you can change that's going to fix everything. In fact, I have a 3.5 hour course on just practicing more efficiently. So it's really hard to know like what you personally need. You'll get the most mileage when you can realize the bad habit you have and remove that. It's not about adding habits. It's about taking away the things that are not working. So a really common one is playing more material than you need to solve a problem. So for example, you have 10 measures, you make one mistake on measure 6, and then you play all 10 measures again to try and fix that. When you really only need to start from measure 5, just a little lead into the problem on 6, and stop at 7. So you practice 5 and 6 in the beginning of 7 to solve the measure problem in 6. And that's literally 1/5 as much as playing 10 measures. This is a common scenario. I could point it out in 100 different ways where I've seen students do this. It's just a matter of time. You're talking about saving time. If you only have 3 hours or 2, or if you have 20 minutes and you want to cover a problem that's 10 measures and you do it 10 times, then that's going to fill half your practice session. But if you're only practicing 2.5 measures, then you can do it 10 times and you've still got a bunch of time left over. So that's like the most basic generic advice. Like it's not at all going to cover everything, but the first thing I would try and get rid of is not practicing things that you're good at, that you ultimately don't need to review. Practice in smaller bite-sized chunks and practice to problem solve, not just to repeat and get more comfortable in the fingers. Because the comfort comes through problem solving. It doesn't come through playing it again. So, there we go. All right, I don't know exactly how many questions I got through. I think 5 of the 10. here I am overly ambitious. Well, I guess no, 6, because I combined the scherzo and the concerto. Unfortunately, I have a student in 70 seconds. They're actually here. So, what we'll do is I'll probably do a second part to this in, I don't know, a couple days, couple weeks. I'll announce it. You're all on the email thing. Or I might just like record it on my own and then combine it all into one video and send it all back to you. I'm not sure. But one way or another, you'll get your questions answered. In any case, it was a ton of fun. I'm glad we can meet today. Thank you everyone for taking out your schedule and coming to say hi. So any last minute salutations? Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. Cool. Looking good. Well, see you all again soon. This is only the beginning, as you all know. There's tons more planned for the year. Next month, I'm going to record 360 videos, so there's a lot coming. Anyway, I will see you all soon, and stay in touch. All right. Here we are, my friends. Part 2. I figured I would just record this instead of do a second session later, because it'd be kind of hard to coordinate the same people and all that. Plus, I'm really just eager for you guys to get the feedback right away and be able to get this, especially for everyone that couldn't attend live. So here we go. I was more than halfway through the questions, actually. And the way I typically am, I'm a little bit faster when there aren't people in the room. And that's usually because there's no energy to kind of go back and forth, right? So I always like it when people are here because it just feels more conversational. But it's the same thing. I mean, it's still my advice, regardless. So here we go. The next question was regarding a topic that I think a lot of people feel, but often maybe struggle to put their finger on or their words into. And basically, it's how to be expressive at the piano. So I'll just read this because it's kind of detailed here. How can I play with better control on the piano and express the piece I want to, the way I want it? I'm on an electric keyboard or electric piano, so that makes things harder. And then I asked a follow-up question, and here was the follow-up response. The piece I'm currently struggling to express without getting a harsh sound is the Chopin Etude Opus 10, number 12, which is the revolutionary for those that don't know. This one. What I'm trying to express is the agony and anger of Chopin during the time he wrote the piece, and it's mostly on the right-hand melody. However, sometimes in the piece I get consumed by the left hand and it sounds rough. And then what do I mean by control is rhythm and accuracy mostly, but particularly rhythm. Okay, and then he also mentions Schumann's Traumerei. However, I just don't think I'll have time to get into that. So kind of my rules, like one question per person when it comes to like a big Q&A. So here we go. Expression is, first of all, in the mind to a certain degree. Like it's a perception, right? Some say that was expressive, others say it wasn't. To a certain degree, you can't say with absolute certainty that was truly expressive or not. But the principle I would have you think about is, are you expressive because you feel it here internally, or are you expressive because it's actually sounding that way? What do I mean? You might, so you might go, and feel like great internal expression. And yet, because of what you're doing physically, it's not coming out. It's just dead as a doornail. And the reason for that is because the body, for some reason, is not matching how you're feeling about the piece. Because that's not a guarantee. Just because I feel passionate on the inside does not mean my fingers know how to translate that. There's still mechanics and physics involved. So it helps to have an imagination, certainly. But if your body hasn't learned to create that kind of sound, you will not create it. So if you want to create a passionate sound, It's usually through dynamics that we're going to measure this. Like, for example, it doesn't sound very passionate. It's not a matter of how loud you play it, it's a matter of how much you swell, right? So like, there's these little micro inflections that when you add a little pedal and speed up, it's quite exciting. And then in that big crazy section, it's the bass notes right here. And so on, so on. And then that sweep up to the top, coming back. And coming back down, right? It's basically the dynamics that communicate whether or not there's this emotional energy in the piece. Because you can feel all that internally, and if all you're doing is this, nobody's going to perceive that as passionate or full of expression. So you do qualify something though without getting a harsh sound. That's kind of a funny thing to say when you're on a digital, because of course we all want a beautiful sound, but an acoustic will respond to this much more. A digital is really hard to make a harsh sound because it's not like actual physics and mechanics of key levers and things. So like you can slam it out and it's generally not a harsh sound. I guess it depends on the keyboard. But what I would say is, generally speaking, the more follow through you have, the less harsh the sound is. So on a long note, if I go like this, it's a little bit brassy, a little cutting. See, when I play, this is locked up, and my fingers are locked up. Now, listen to the difference when I move with the wrist past playing, right? It's subtle. It's very subtle. But that little bit of give on all of your joints, especially with the combination of the pedal to swell it up, that creates a much more round tone. So you don't want to go like that. You want to go, see, and follow through. Mostly on the long notes, because you don't have time on the short notes. But you don't want to go down, 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 down. You want to go down, over, down, forward. So you're always playing with motion. See how I'm flexible in the wrist? There's a lot of that give. My teacher always said, be like a puppet on a string. And there's very few exceptions to this. I would say if you've heard my performance of Stravinsky Rite of Spring, you can go back and watch it. There's a lot of this where I would intentionally have steely palms, like. Because there you don't want a soft, energyless attack. You want that bite, the grit of that has to come through. Or another moment. I actually intentionally lock up my arm there. On purpose. It's not because I have back technique. It's because it has to have that kind of, it's a little violent, but the piece is violent. It's that slasher kind of a sound, right? Of like with a knife. Like a very violent violinist. We're not talking about roundness. We want bitterness in that case. But in Chopin, of course, we don't. So it's not that one is better than the other. It's you have to know where to apply it when. And that's what I talk about. Is like, it's not the passion you feel internally. It's, do you know the body and do you know what hammers do and how physics works, that when you go slower, you get quieter. And when you go faster, you get louder. But then there's also the follow through and the flat finger versus the pointed finger. A little cleaner on the pointed, a little mushier on the flat. So like when you watch Horowitz play Schubert, that stuff there to kind of warm up the sound. And when you watch something, he does more like the Opus 53 Polonaise. There's a little bit more like, a little bit more point to the fingers to get that military kind of a sound, right? So I guess what I would think about the most is how you're approaching the key and how you're following through with the key. That all has to do with it. And then 3 times the amount of dynamics that you want. So if you want da 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 da, I was in the wrong key. Then go 3 times the amount. Start really quiet and end really loud. Way too much. You adapt to that, and then you realize, okay, that's too much, but it's easier to pull back. That's rusty. I haven't played it in a while. But I hope you get the point. I would think passion comes from dynamics and from touch. So, I mean, I could talk about this all day. That's obviously not the only thing that makes you sound passionate or expression filled. But certainly, that's some of the basics. And to be honest with you, I'm all for making a good tone. But I would rather hear a harsh sound in a piece like this than too careful of a performance. You're not going to hear every teacher say that. Especially Chopin purists. They're going to be like, I'd rather hear this. Like, they would really rather have that than this. And like, I understand why. That is a little too violent. The other one was so mushy that it doesn't communicate the mood at all, right? So it would be like, I would rather hear the mood that's already there too much than not enough. And if we're talking about a Chopin Etude, like, I'd rather hear it too light and a little bit glib. Even if you're like kind of missing the notes, than like too heavy. So the rule is not play louder all the time. It's overdo it all the time. And it works both ways. So in a nocturne, this is why I believe Daniel Trifonov placed so high in the competition when he did, is he had this ability in nocturnes to just play like overly glib, like that's the one he played, the B major nocturne. And to be honest, I'll fully acknowledge I'm not a fan. I like some of what he does. A lot of what he does I find too wispy and not committed enough. I'm not here to debate. It's just my opinion. But there is, I have to say, I credit where credit is due. There is a certain power in doing that when that it's a dreamy piece, as opposed to doing. Totally by ear, I apologize. But see, like, I don't really like either one, but I would rather have overly glib in that piece than not. But I would rather have overly violent in the Revolutionary Etude than not. So I hope that brings some clarity on expression. All right, here we go. Dante, I already answered his question. I went out of order because Dante was on the call. Just want to make sure. Yeah, we talked about like practice tips and stuff. Okay. I'm confident I'm going to say this wrong, but Huang, I believe is the name. I only have time to answer one of these, so let's see. The polyrhythms fast, softly, and smoothly. Okay. You know what? I'm actually not going to answer this because I have a lot of videos on polyrhythms. at least 7 or 8 now on YouTube. And I just don't see a point in telling you what I've already made, because you've asked other questions. So I'm going to talk about the other things, and then you could just literally search my channel. Like, I've got a 4 against 3 polyrhythm, 5 against 3, 2 against 3, a general video on polyrhythms, and I know there are more, but there's at least those, and if you just type those in and Aaron Petit, you will find them. Anyway, so here we go. Gymnopédie, I should know how to say this, but I don't know if it's gym or gyme. I don't know. I'm going to say it like that. Gymnopede by Satie. It's very difficult to keep my left hand steady and soft while doing leaps and voicings in my right hand. Also, some big chords create tension in my left hand too. Okay? I think I know what you're talking about. Probably these. These ones with the ninths throughout it. Do you have any advice on how to solve those issues? Okay, yes, I pretty much have advice on everything. Whether or not it's the best advice, I can't guarantee. But we've all heard this. And so on and so forth. There's kind of two questions here. One is how to keep the left hand soft and steady. The trick is to go even key speed in your depth. So really perceive the depth of the pinky. Find your limit. Right there. That's my limit. I got to the bottom and it didn't sound because I went too slow. So if I go a little faster, I'm reliably getting a quiet sound. Now watch, if I go slower than that, nothing. And I am at the key bottom. Right? And it's just physics. If the lever does not move fast enough, it doesn't create enough throw for the hammer to hit the string. The string's up here and it's like this. Versus faster with more kickback. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but that's the basics. I know I'm going to get somebody commenting like, oh, you don't understand piano tech. I know that there are like hundreds and thousands of parts in the piano. I'm just oversimplifying it for the analogy's sake. That's basically how it works. So as you go slow, that's the key to playing soft. But going too slowly will get you literally nothing. Oh, there you go. And most of the time people do that is because they're trying to play quietly and you anticipate it and you go, and you're so afraid to touch the piano that's what happens. Then you don't like that, so you overcompensate by going harder, and then it ends up going faster. So just intentionally try to play the pinkies alone through the whole piece, like G, D, G, D, G, D, G. There's like 400 of those at the beginning. Just sensing your key speed. And by the way, the hand is not tense, but it is firm. The rule is, can you hold a phone between your fingers? I'm not having to squeeze. I'm not tight. It's just, if I don't have some tension, what happens? The thing falls, right? It requires a little bit to hold the shape. So go in with a little bit of that firmness. If you're too loose, this is what happens. It's flabby and it has too much give. Like, honestly, I don't know how Valentina Lisitsa plays. She looks like this all the time. It's like so loose. I'm like, how do you... She must have like a steeliness in her fingertips, because it seems like it would sound like this. Like you wouldn't hear what she's playing, but you always get... You know, the Red Riding Hood. That's like her piece, right? It's just like, and I've seen her play live too, like literally from the second row in a really small room. So like, she looks like this all the time. It doesn't matter. Rachmaninoff. I mean, I can kind of get through music like this, but I don't know how she does that. I don't know how I got on that either. But that's the exception to the rule. You generally don't want too fluffy of hands. I've never seen any other pianist look that fluffy and still get the notes to come out. Argerich is the opposite. She looks like a steel brick sometimes, just like, you know. Like, to the point where you're like, is she tense? Evgeny Kissin too, like he looks so locked up. Watch his Schumann Toccata, which is that piece, and it looks like so uncomfortable. So, in any case, tension is a whole nother thing. There is a proper amount, there's too much, and there's also not enough. And in this case, I worry about you not having enough. If you're not playing soft or steady, the overcompensation is like too fluffy of a hand, and you just lose it all. So, start there, get your pinkies under control, then go to your chords. Same thing, it's the same principle, except you have to get all three down together. So the way I would do that is play the three. Don't worry if they're in sync or not yet. So I'm going to do it wrong on purpose. They all split off, right? Just make sure you lift the three notes together. That wasn't good. See, watch. Hear that? The D is the only thing that actually is heard, because that means I lifted the other two fingers faster than I lifted that one. So there was an inconsistency in my firmness throughout the hand. So now I'm going to try and get it right. Oh, I still did it. Hang on. Now I did it the other way. Now I lifted the D too quickly, and the B is remaining. So no, I can literally see it. See, my D is higher than my B. I'm not trying to do that. That was better. That was a more even release. I don't know how much you can hear that over the Zoom, but I was watching the keys, making sure that they're moving exactly in sync as they release. This is worth the work. When you do this, you will get a much more released, or a much more coordinated stroke in the first place. Right? Very helpful. So, in one moment, I need to quickly fire something off real quick. Okay, thanks for your patience. So, basically, that should take care of the left hand. The leaps, I mean, the only reason the leaps would make you play louder is if you're doing them too late, like this. You're staying in the key a long time, and then you're lunging at the top. But it's pedaled, as you should know. So, you go like this, and then you move over. Right? If you do this, then there's like there's more control. But if you go quickly, you don't have control. So just first play one note and pedal, and immediately get off of it. Get used to just removing yourself. That gives you more time to get up there. That's what I would recommend. And then for the right hand, and voicing. So you say voicing in your right hand, but there's only a single note melody. So I'm not sure what you meant by that. There's really not a lot to voice, unless you just mean the right hand is like louder than the left hand. In which case, see, watch your wrist here, that you're not frozen. It's definitely possible to play the melody without being free here. The problem is you don't have as much control of the sound. When you use a consistent arm motion, what ends up happening is you associate the volume with the movement. And so you're much more consistent when it comes. Kind of thing. And this will automatically be a different sound than this because you're moving in a different way. So it's not just like playing it louder. I mean, that is what's happening, But in order to get that to happen, you have to think of it differently and literally do different things in the body. This is not unlike the revolutionary etude we just talked about. How there's like motions that create the expression. It's not just, say, play it louder or something. So, okay. That should take care of it. Okay, yeah. I was just rereading the question. Seems fine to me. So, 2 more. Here we go. Vivian. Oh, wait, no, I guess I kind of talked about this because this was asking about the Tchaikovsky First Concerto. Now, I will add a little bit now that I'm off the call. For that matter, I should add a little bit specifics on the Chopin Fourth Scherzo. I mentioned, whenever this was, probably on the video, an hour and 20 minutes ago now, I mentioned a couple things. One is that you should start with the hardest thing at the beginning. The problem is, what I did not acknowledge is what actually is the hardest thing. Some pieces is very obvious. For example, the Chopin Ballade, where I mentioned the coda. That should be pretty obvious. Like, it's really rare that any pianist feels any part of the Ballade number 1 is harder than the coda. Very, very rare to find that. But in the Tchaikovsky Concerto, it's not the same case. For example, some people, for sure, without a doubt, would say that the octaves are the hardest part. There's a lot of octave passages. For sure, some would say that. But then there's a different octave. It's been a long time since I've played the Tchaikovsky. I don't even remember if that's the right octave, but there's that. And then there's the third movement octave. You know, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, if you have struggles with octaves, I literally have 9 videos on how to play octaves on YouTube. So check it out. Just type in Aaron Petit octaves. Everything you could possibly imagine that weighs in on the topic, from how to shape them, how to move, how to think of them, practicing pinkies alone, practicing thumbs alone, everything you could imagine. Even for small-handed pianists, and the way you move between black and white keys. Like, literally, I've covered everything you could possibly consider when it comes to playing octaves. So I don't think I have need to ever make another octave video. If anything, it's just to reach a new audience who never saw the old ones. But check that out. The problem is, I know plenty of pianists. I've played this concerto, and I know at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 7 other people that have played this concerto. And honestly, I know so many pianists, I'm sure more than that. Just that I specifically remember them learning this. And I don't know that really anyone agreed on what was the hardest part. In fact, for me, I'll flat out say it was the third movement opening. That theme is impossible. That is awkward. It's just, for me, like, my hands are abnormally large. It's about an 11th, almost a 12th. I actually can stretch C to G on a good day. See, no pedals. It's just, it's very, very uncomfortable, where it even feels like the webbing between my 5th and 4th is stretching. So I actually never do that, but I can definitely stretch C to F without much trouble, and C to E is easy, even over the keys. So I can do the famous Zifra 10th glissandos, sort of. And octave glissandos in like Waldstein is really easy. Right, so the point is, hand size has a lot to do with comfort, but only in certain things, because in this case, with everything bunched together, it's literally like these little deer hooves trying to play the piano. And I hate that. Van Cliburn had this same problem. He had bigger hands than I did. And because a lot of people I know knew him personally. One of them was Mark Westcott, who everyone who was in the Van Cliburn competition got to know Van quite well. And my teacher got third place, and I had another teacher that got second place. So there's a lot of history there. And they all said, yeah, Van was like hated pieces like this because he had to clump his hands together. So it's the same problem. And he's like, when Van played the Tchaikovsky the concerto, he played like this at the beginning, you know. Like he's closing his hands in while everyone else is like, you know, these big duck feet or whatever. And Martha Argerich is like kind of the same way. She has to kind of close in a little bit. She has quite large hands. This almost like effortless look to it. But in the case of the third movement, getting that precise staccato and still shaping it. It's awful. And then similarly, the second movement. Oh, this is horrible. Like these little mini double notes and super fast. In the scherzo of the second movement, or I can't remember if he called it that, but the really fast middle. There's passages like that I would literally practice for like weeks and feel not great about. And then there's other parts, like for me, I practiced diminished seventh arpeggios from like day 2. So I could do those all day. Or whatever it is. I literally don't remember what key it is. But like the basic gist, right? Like I can do that kind of stuff, no problem. I can do octaves like decently well. Arpeggios and stuff, you know. It's not too bad. But then like the trills and the section was just brutal. Trying to get that light and fast and voiced and actually just get the right notes. So I guess all this to say, how do you even assess where to start is the first question. I would sight read through the piece 2 or 3 times. And obviously you have to fake a ton. You got to slow down where you can't get through it. But you have to get really familiar with all the different techniques of it. It's like only 30 minutes, but it feels like 2 hours because there's just so much to get through. That first movement alone is just endless. I think it needs a cut myself. No conductor would ever do that, but I would definitely like to play it where you cut out about 1/3 of the first movement and just get creative with some reshuffling of things. But yeah, I think it needs a rewrite, but obviously we can't do that, so label it appropriately. But I would try and label everything on a scale of 1 to 4. 4 being nearly impossible, 1 being like I could probably work on this a couple times and have it, like no problem. And most of it's going to be a 3 or 4, to be honest. If it's anything like my experience, again, I've said this earlier in the call, but that concerto really takes the cake on the hardest concerto I have ever played, above Rock 3 for sure. And not quite as hard, but you know what shockingly was really difficult for me was the Gershwin Rhapsody in Blue. I would not put it above Rock 3, definitely not, but it's certainly harder than it sounds. And considering how short it is, I definitely had a lot of trouble with it. For a lot of the same reasons as the Tchaikovsky. It's just a lot of really awkward things in there to play and to pull off. But it was also like really early in my development. So like if I learned it now for the first time, I'm sure I would not have struggled with it as much. A lot of it has to do with how much skill do you have before you start the project. And Tchaikovsky also I did before Rock 3 or before Brahms 2. So I'm sure that didn't help. But anyway, there's that. So with Chopin Scherzo 4, same issue. For me, the worst stuff throughout it, and Josh Wright, if you know him, he completely agrees with me on this, is all the double note stuff, like which is right at the beginning, of course. All that stuff. You really have to be fresh to play that, to get it light, voiced, crisp, and just. Just kind of like that lightness, the bounciness, and the shaping, and the gorgeousness of it. Like, a lot of it feels really comfortable, and then you get to the... And by the way, the Tchaikovsky Concerto has that stuff. This kind of light double note stuff that's bouncing around. That's some of the hardest stuff to do, in my opinion. But again, other people might not find that difficult. If you learned the Liszt's Paganini Etude, which I played around with for 2 days, and I was like, yeah, no. But if you've learned that, you're going to be a lot more used to bouncing around, and then you get to Chopin Fourth Scherzo, and then it's easy. But if you haven't learned that, then it's like, you have no experience, then it's going to be a lot harder. So that would be probably the thing that I would look out for, is learn all of those first. And then, I mean, in general, Fourth Scherzo, I think, is about as hard as Chopin gets. It's not as hard as the Third Sonata, simply because it's not half an hour long. But there's a little bit of everything. You've got chords, you've got melodies to voice. Like that kind of simple melody thing. Then it comes back in double notes where you have to voice. You've got interesting modulations, tons of pedal tricks, really light zippy finger work, left-hand melodies, chords, octaves, double notes, obviously. Oh, and then there's the trills. Yeah, so actually there's kind of everything in it. And there's a lot of passages and passage work that's not terribly comfortable. You have to have really good fingering. So again, same strategy. Go through it all. Get familiar with like 1 or 2 days of just reading through it and label everything 1 to 4. It's just like the Tchaikovsky Concerto. Everything's probably going to be in the 3 to 4. You'll have a few more 2s in the Scherzo 4 than in the Tchaikovsky Concerto. But same kind of thing. Okay, so I just wanted to say that because I'm sure both of you didn't know where to really start with those pieces if they're brand new. So we are at our last question. Let's see. Oh, wait, the last question was the Fourth Scherzo. Did I do them all? Let me just triple check. I don't want to leave anyone out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I think there was somebody live on the call. Yeah, I did all of these. Okay, sweet. Well, there we go. There's the end of the Q&A. So, thanks everyone for joining, whether you joined live or whether you joined in the future for me, but I guess in the past by now, you're watching it, whatever you would call that. Whether you're joining on YouTube, let me put it that way. It was a lot of fun. Really glad to do this. Thanks again for the 10,000 subscribers. That's amazing, and it's only the beginning. So excited to keep doing this. I'll probably do another surprise Q&A, I don't know, maybe 15K, maybe 20 when we get there, which at this rate will be like a month because it's happening quickly. So that's awesome. But anyway, I'll see you all later. If you have questions, obviously drop it in the comments, and feel free to reach out through email. I will also mention, for those of you that don't know, I referenced this, I believe, earlier in the call, but I have a learning community online called Key Learners Piano Club, and it's a lot of fun. It's basically, imagine like social media, but there's no noise. Like there's no ads, there's no distractions, there's no, Candy Crush Saga on the side like Facebook or whatever. We get to do posts, ask each other questions, keep updated, all that kind of stuff. And there's different topics, so we can talk about our progress or just general discussion, Q&A, like what we did today. And then there's live calls. I do 2 a week, soon to be 3 a week, for all sorts of different things. And then I've got an entire classroom in here of topical tutorials, a technique course, a practice course, a skill assessment so you can see where you're at. I mean, I'm not even showing you half of what's in here. It's a lot of fun. So the point is, when you come into this, you don't leave the same. Everything gets easier. You learn music faster. You start to think deeper about it. If you liked at all what we did today, what you've just heard for the last hour and a half or 2 hours, it's only a taster of what you would get from this club. And it's even more personalized because I use all of the material from the members to lead the discussions. So it's not just me talking at you what I want to talk about. It's me solving your problems on the fly. It's as close as you can get to one-on-one lessons with me for a fraction of the cost. So if you're interested in that, just send me an email, ap@aaronpetitpiano.com, and we can get talking. I can answer any questions you have, and I'd love to see you in the group. In any case, thanks for watching. I will see you next time.